This video is going to be kind of like an open letter to the Canadian government, an open letter to Justin Trudeau, an open letter to the Supreme Court, an open letter to anybody who is in a position of power, who has any kind of say as far as animal rights go and as far as our laws go. Let's just take things back a little bit first. When I first became a vegetarian, like 16 years ago, I didn't want to just become a vegetarian to be a vegetarian. I wanted to become a vegetarian because I loved animals and I wanted to educate myself on, things that were happening in the world of animals and their rights. And I wanted to be wholly involved and I wanted that passion to be there so that there was never an opportunity for me to consider going back. So, like I said, going back, when I first became a vegetarian, I took it upon myself to educate myself as far as like what was happening in the world of animal rights. And I watched the slaughterhouse videos. Forced my way through them. I watched the exposés on SeaWorld. I watched the undercover exposés that are done in pet breeding facilities, pet supply stores that supply pets to places like PetSmart, for example. I watched all of that stuff, albeit it was extremely difficult, but I watched all of it because I wanted to educate myself and I wanted to be wholly aware and also wholly committed to this. Like, I love animals, but I love them even more now knowing all the horrific things that I know because it's motivating me to continue not only advocating for them, but staying on the course of being a vegetarian. And hopefully one day I'll veer into that vegan direction. But right now, I'm wholly content as a vegetarian. And, my advocating for animals, it's only going to continue. And this message, this video, the whole reason for this video is because I don't know how many of you guys follow my blog. I don't know how often you guys check it out. I do a lot of reporting on animal news stories, a lot of commentary on things that are happening in the world of animals, things that are going right, things that are going wrong. But there's one common factor here, and that's Canada and our less than stellar record for animal rights. My main point of this message is about animal cruelty convictions. Canada, I hope you're listening. Animal cruelty. Our animal cruelty convictions are like laughable, extremely laughable. You're looking at things like fines, you're looking at things like bans on owning animals, you're looking at things like probation for short periods of time. Depending on the case and the severity of the case, those punishments might be appropriate. But I'm diving a little bit deeper and I'm diving into things like violent abuse of animals. I'm talking about, reading stories about people beating their dogs with metal rods or throwing their animals against the wall. Or, there was a story about a video of him like beating his dog in an elevator and like throwing it around. Like these sorts of animal cruelty related things are what I'm addressing. When you look at like murder, for example, murder of a human being, there's a tiered system which kind of like puts you into a certain place. Is it premeditated? Accidental? Did you, murder several people, like capital murder, first degree, second degree, and the punishments that go along with those things are according to the severity of the case. But when you look at animal cruelty as a whole, it doesn't encompass any other sort. It's just animal cruelty. So the person who like neglects their dog, they're in almost the same category as that person who maliciously attacks and potentially kills their dog. So with that knowledge, I'm hoping that, my message gets where it needs to go and they understand, as a country, when we look at animal rights and we look at the way society feels about animal rights, there's a disconnect between our government and between the citizens of Canada. Our government has not addressed animal rights laws in several years, like decades. And then you look at society now and vegetarian and vegan lifestyles are like exponentially greater than they were even 10 years ago. Animal advocacy groups are getting bigger. There's more of a fight. You look at Ringling Brothers closing. You look at the damage that's been done to SeaWorld. People are fighting for animals. People want animals treated better. But until our government accepts that these sorts of things we want them punished accordingly, we're going to have to keep fighting. And I will continue to be posting on my blog. I will have to continue to make these messages and these videos that hopefully reach one person, just one person who has any kind of a say, who might even be willing to just open that dialogue. But the moral of my story here, animal cruelty. If I were to ask you, like, what is the difference, okay? If I were to take a case where somebody beat a human being within an inch of their life, that's malicious, they intended to do it, they intended to cause bodily harm and or death, those things deserve punishment by law. They deserve prison sentences. What is the difference? Is the intent any different when we're talking about an animal who's been beaten? If you can take a weapon or your own fists even, and you can intentionally injure a helpless animal, a defenseless, voiceless animal, if you can bludgeon, attack, beat, torture, if you can do that to an animal, what is the difference between doing that to an animal and doing that to a human being? The only difference here is how our government perceives it. Okay? The intent is no different. If you're taking, a metal rod and beating your puppy near death, you deserve to be in jail. We have to, as a country, our lawmakers, the people in charge here we need to address our animal rights laws. We need to set up a tiered system. Neglect, mild abuse, torture, and, ferocious abuse, and then slaughter. And this tiered system needs to come with appropriate punishment. Any kind of a human being who can attack, intentionally hurt, molest, beat, torture, any of those things, if you can do that to an animal, you need jail time. You need rehabilitation time. Probation does not rehabilitate you. Getting a fine does not rehabilitate you. These sorts of things, the reason that these sorts of things are continually happening, we're seeing it all the time. I'm coming up with 3 stories a week for my news video recaps. That's because these sorts of things are continuously happening and there's no punishment being doled out, no appropriate punishment. With laws in place that say you will go to jail if you do this, you will go to jail if you beat an animal with the intent on harming it, you will go to jail if you attack or molest an animal. With laws in place that support the way that we feel about animal rights, you'll see a decline in these sorts of things. You'll see a decline in these stories coming out once, twice, 3, 4 times a week about somebody who's viciously attacked an animal, about somebody who's molested an animal. I've talked to you guys a little bit about bestiality in Canada, and one of the big cases that really brought bestiality to light for me was a case that I read earlier in the year about a man who molested his stepdaughters, and he did so using the family dog. Details of the case obviously were not provided because it's obviously within the court system. That's where those details really come out. But it was just general details that came out. But at the end of the day, the case of bestiality, the charges were dropped. He was charged with other things as well, but the charges of bestiality were dropped based on the simple fact that our bestiality laws say penetration is the only considered fact of bestiality if there is penetration. Which is to say that oral sex with an animal or touching of an animal or having an animal orally please you, or in this case, molest these girls, that's not considered illegal. In Canada, right at this minute, you can molest an animal as long as you do not penetrate it, and that is not considered illegal. So you can see why someone like myself who cares about animals or animal rights groups, you can see why they're so outraged. We are in Canada, a Western country, a progressive Western country, one that prides itself on being empathetic, one that prides itself on being at the forefront of human rights. We have taken great strides in the world of, gay rights specifically, but even now we're looking at, the Muslims and all of the turmoil that's happening, and making sure that those people come to our country and are treated fairly. And people, we're working so hard on that, but then you look at animals and you can still molest an animal and it's not illegal. So you can see where there's a problem. At the end of the day, Canada, we need to address our animal rights and our animal cruelty conviction laws. We need to set up a better system of punishment for somebody who attacks or beats or molests an animal. These sorts of people do not belong on the streets. These sorts of people do not belong amongst the public with this sort of a mentality. Somebody who can attack, beat, molest, torture an animal, they don't belong living next to me. They don't belong saying good morning to my nephews. They don't belong on the streets amongst us without having had jail time or time to rehabilitate or any of those things. We need to set up a stronger system. We need to have better laws in place, something that's going to deter that person who's considering beating their animal. We need to have a law in place that's stronger than what it currently is, because without laws that are strong enough to dissuade somebody from doing something, they will continue to do it. And I will continue to read stories about people who are given probation for beating animals senseless. I will continue to read stories about charges that were dropped in cases involving molestation of animals because there's no penetration. Like a simple technicality like that. How do we live in this country and you can molest an animal? There is a problem. So at the end of the day, I will continue till the day I die to fight for animals. I pray that the time will come, and I'm determined to see it in my lifetime while I'm here, while I'm advocating for animals. I am determined to see our laws change, to see our animal rights laws developed and grown into something much bigger than what they currently are, because our country is a great country. But this, I'd have to say, is probably Canada's shame. It's shameful to think that at this very moment somebody is beating an animal senseless and they're going to get a fine. It's a shame to think that somebody is neglecting their animals and letting them live in squalor and keeping them chained up outside, despite the elements, despite any of that stuff, with barely any food in an unpadded house. And they're going to get a ban on owning animals, which ultimately does nothing. It's a shame to think that at this very moment, animal cruelty will be convicted and you will not see jail time. So this message is for you, Canada. I'm talking to you. Let's open dialogue. Let's start talking about animal rights. We've put it on the back burner for too many years, and I'm so tired of opening my MSN homepage and seeing stories of animals that are being abused and the crimes that are going to go unpunished. And frankly, they're going to be overlooked because our government does not perceive animals as important. Animals are just as important as we are. And at the end of the day, as I said, somebody who is going to beat an animal, molest an animal, attack, torture, all of those things, somebody who's going to do that to an animal, if they are not stopped, they're going to move on to children and they're going to move on to the weaker members of society. That is progression. And if it's not nipped in the bud immediately, these crimes will be on your hands, the Canadian government, because we have not taken steps to prevent it. We have not taken steps to really deter somebody from doing those things. We have not taken the appropriate steps to get that person rehabilitated or in prison where they belong for those sorts of crimes. So again, Canada, wake up. We cannot continue to allow these sorts of crimes to go unpunished. Open the dialogue. Let's get animal rights on the forefront here. Too many years have gone by where these sorts of things are being put on the back burner, and enough's enough. Let's discuss animals. Let's put it on the forefront. Let's realize that your country wants animal cruelty convictions to come with appropriate punishment. Your country wants people who molest animals put in prison. Your country wants people who beat, torture, abuse, neglect. Your country wants those people punished, and they don't want them punished by fines. They don't want them punished by bans on owning animals or probation. They want them punished with jail time. Enough is enough. So again, Canada, I hope you get this message. This message is for you. Be be at the forefront of animal rights and show the world that, as empathetic, as progressive, and as amazing as this country is, show them why we're so amazing. Because right now, our animal rights are shameful. And we need to make a change for animals and for the people of your country. Because at the end of the day, I do not feel proud to live in a country where somebody's going to molest an animal and they're not going to be punished. I do not feel proud to live in a country where you can abuse and neglect an animal and you'll get a ban on owning animals or a $100 fine. That is not appropriate. It's time to step up and put a tiered system in place where there are levels of abuse and charges and penalties that are accommodating to each of those charges. Enough's enough. Wake up, Canada, because animal rights are important in your country and you are not on board with us, and you need to be.